Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and you're going to join me on my quest here as you see me building a replica of Manchester City's Etihad Stadium. Other stadia are available, as far as I'm aware, for your team of choice. Now, the reason I wanted this was because when I saw it for the first time I thought that looked really good on a drop zone commander table. Even though it's not exactly the right scale for drop zone commander, anyone who's played real-time strategy games, for example, you'll know that structures don't necessarily need to be in scale for them to look appropriate. Because if you had an actual sports stadium on a drop zone commander table, it would probably fill up half the table, which is a little bit too big. So I was looking for something that's big enough to be a nice big focal point of the table, but not so big that it completely dominates it. So I'll let you decide at the end when you see the finished pictures, whether you think it matches up nicely. So you can see me preparing all the pieces here, poking out all the little bits of card with a cocktail stick. That seems to be the best way to do it, as far as I'm concerned. And also if you poke through so that the part you're ripping off at the end isn't the coloured side that's going to be visible, that helps as well, so you're not taking any of the art off the card. It does make quite a mess though, poking all those holes in it. It's quite a complicated process putting this thing together. The first few pieces are very easy, other than just poking the card through. But you'll see there are about 5 or 6 different cards that you have to punch the various pieces out of, and they're not that clearly marked as to what piece is where. They've really just packed on the pieces wherever they could, which I imagine is a cost-cutting exercise, rather than grouping things together as you're going to be using them. They're just wherever they can fit, basically. So you do have to go through them quite a bit looking for the right piece. The instructions are fairly clear though. It is just finding the pieces that can be annoying. So what I'm doing here is I'm attaching the pitch to the surrounding piece with some supports. They're going to be going all the way around, and they're also going to be holding up part of the seating as well. As you can see, I've done quite a few of them. There is a lot of pieces like this where they all look kind of the same from a distance, but they're all slightly different, and if you put them in the wrong place then it's just not going to work because they've got slots in different places. So you have to make sure that when you're popping them out you keep track of which piece is which, because a lot of them don't have any kind of markings written on them. I'm just putting down a tunnel there, which is where any vehicles would come onto the stadium. For example, if they had to rush an ambulance out there, that's where it would come from. And there's the little player tunnel there as well. It's quite a detailed model, as you'll see. And I'm just taking out some of the seating now, which is going to be punched down. The issue with these pieces, I found, was that when you press it in at one side, and then you go to the other, the original side can pop out sometimes. They're quite sturdy once you get all the connection points in, but until that point, they can pop out while you're assembling it. Nothing's come off since I finished it, for the record, but while putting it together, several pieces did come loose. Little barrier around the pitch there. You can see that it's taking me quite a while, even though it's greatly sped up, it's taking me a little while to find some of the pieces. It is quite difficult. A lot of them do look very similar, even though they are subtly different, and if you put them in the wrong place that would be a very bad idea. So here it looks like I am just finishing off the walls around the back of the seats there before I move on to the next tier. One thing that did keep happening was I would accidentally, when I was holding the underside, just so I could push down into it, I was accidentally popping things up with my finger. So that wasn't ideal. You just have to be careful with that. Putting one of the outer walls on now. There is an order you're supposed to do this, but each page of the instructions gives you a vast amount of options with which piece you can do first, really. Because there's a lot of pieces that aren't directly connected, so it's not a huge blunder if you put something in slightly the wrong order. Apart from in some cases where you're covering up where you want to be working if you do that in the wrong order. But that doesn't happen that much. It did happen once or twice to me, but I may have edited those bits out. Moving on to the third tier of seats now. Incidentally, this model will become out of date very soon, because the stadium is currently having more seats added to it. But I'm sure the model of the new stadium will be more expensive though. So this will do for me. A lot of consulting of the instructions and then searching through the card. That's a running theme so far. This bit was quite a nightmare. Not because it was difficult to put together, but I'm putting little supports on the top there. And there are many different kinds of them. Some of them are the same, but they are different mostly. And if you put them in the wrong place, then the roof is not going to fit on at all. There they all are. Just skipped some time out. Now this part was the nightmare here, trying to fit the roof on to the stadium. I found that whenever I was trying to press them down, because the supports were on like a bendy, flexible piece underneath, they were just popping out of position. When I pushed down one thing, all of the supports on the other side would just move. So it's very, very difficult. You can see I'm going around straightening them all now. This was a very, very annoying stage. At no point did I feel like flinging it out the window, but it was irritating. This bit more than any other part of the building process. Eventually what I had to do was go around and hold each support as I was pushing it in to make sure they didn't slide out of position, and eventually I got it. It just took a lot of time and a lot of patience. And it does look quite juicy as far as roofs go when it's on. I'm just going around here just making sure they're all in securely, because the last thing I want is it coming off after that incredible hassle of putting it on. And there I am showing it off. Missed the camera the first time, but there you go. I'm putting together these spiral walkways now that are going to be on the outside of the stadium. These are fairly straightforward to put together, but again the pieces to each one are spread around the place quite liberally, so it's not too easy to find them all. Putting it together is fairly simple. It is easy to rip these pieces though, because it's quite a tight fit wrapping the spiral part around the central piece. So if you were putting together this model, I would say be very careful with these parts. Very easy to rip. You may end up having to glue some bits of the art back on again. Well, there's all 8 of them done in record time, thanks to the miracle of editing. And I'm moving on to the shop outside the stadium now, which I think is also a little bit out of date, because I think the shop is slightly bigger now than it is in this model, perhaps. And there's some more supports going on the outside now, which are for... You have to purchase some kind of string separately if you want to make it look like the metal cables are there. They do recommend using silver string, but they don't actually provide it in the box. I haven't as yet done that, because I think it looks alright as it is, and I'm not interested in the extra expense for what I don't deem to be a particularly critical part of the build. This part here is very important, going around on the outside, and those parts that go underneath there, they elevate the whole thing a little bit, which means that when you're putting it down on a table, all the bits of card poking through underneath aren't going to be shoved up, which is very important. And there I am, very proud of my handiwork there. I didn't show every single little detail going in there, but you get the idea. Giving you a nice little spin round there. And we're going to look at some still images of it with Drop Zone Commander models now. As you can see, it's clearly not in a perfect scale. If you look at the size of the seats and compare that to the size of Drop Zone Commander Man, obviously it's slightly too small, but as far as an attractive piece of terrain on the table, I think it's very good. And as I was saying earlier, you wouldn't want it in perfect scale because it'd just be enormous.